Hello, everyone. I am Lexi. I am your host, and this is Lexi's Book Nook. This is my BookTube channel where I talk about all things books, book club recommendations, and Reese Witherspoon books. So I will be reading a bunch of these books and more. Some books on my TBR list. I have a podcast all on this on Spotify for free. I have it on Patreon as well if you want to support the podcast. See my face like you are able to hear on YouTube. See my little book nook, get inspiration for your own, and see the cover of books. So that is on my podcast, Lexi's Book Nook, on Spotify for free and Patreon for $3 a month if you want to support the podcast. But you're here on BookTube, so you have additional bonuses. So you get bonus episodes of books that are beyond the TBR list from my podcast. So I will have some books on my podcast, but if I go beyond that and I am able to read more, those episodes come here onto YouTube. So today's episode is Go Set a Watchman by Harper Lee. I have a little backstory of why I chose this book. For example, about a month ago or so, I went to this adoption event for pets, and I fell in love with this little black cat. She was very, very cute, fresh out of the litter, maybe a month old. I put the adoption papers in, and I knew I wanted to name her a literary person or character, whether it's an author or a character from a book. And I went through all the books that I liked, something different, something cute, and Harper was on the list, like Harper Lee. And I already watched or read To Kill a Mockingbird, so I wasn't going to read it again. Mockingjay, I think. And it was a little dry for me, so I didn't want to reread it. But I figured I really want to name my cat Harper, but I really haven't read much about Harper Lee or her books. So I decided to read Go Set a Watchman, and I like this book more. So we're going to go into this episode. I'm going to go over the summary on the book, my thoughts on it, and then 3 discussion questions just to keep this episode short. But if you're wondering about the kitten, I wish I had her here. She got sick. She is probably still alive, but she has like this lifelong disease, and I decided not to adopt her. But if she didn't, she would be here in my book nook. So Harper can't be here. But Harper Lee is here in the house, so we are going to go into Go Set a Watchman. This book follows To Kill a Mockingbird. At 26 years old, Jean Louise Finch, or Scout, returns home to Macomb, Alabama from New York City to visit her aging father, Atticus. Scout's homecoming turns bittersweet when she learns some disturbing truths about her family, the town, and the people closest to her. The story is set during the times of turmoil that was transforming the South. Memories from her childhood flashback, and her values and assumptions are thrown into doubt. And my thoughts. I had read To Kill a Mockingbird just for fun several years ago because I was never assigned to read it in school. And being the bookworm that I am today, I was very curious about it and wanted to see why it was recommended and read the books that I wasn't able to read. But when I finally read To Kill a Mockingbird, it definitely felt like a book report, like a homework assignment, because there were parts that were pretty dry. But I could see why it's a banned book. I could see why it was popular in the conversations that it would strike up with students and even adults alike. It wasn't the most enjoyable in my opinion, but I wanted to read more of Harper Lee, and I'm glad that I gave her a second chance with Go Set a Watchman. I liked the sequel better than the first, and I don't usually say that. I usually don't think the sequel is better. The only opposition to that is Harry Potter series. But I think for this book in particular, I think it helped that I listened to it and Reese Witherspoon was the narrator, because I've shown a lot of appreciation and love for her as a actress, person, bookworm. Overall, I think she was a really good narrator to voice out the actors or act out the voices and made this story fun. Like, I actually enjoyed listening to it. And I actually do recommend this book for school book reports and book clubs alike. I think this could still have good discussion questions with students and adults and other topics, similar topics To Kill a Mockingbird, but with more mature themes. So I'm just going to go into a few discussion questions, not a lot, keeping this short. I only want to keep you for like 10 minutes if I can. So who is Jean Louise Finch? How has she changed since To Kill a Mockingbird? So we know her as Scout. As an adult, she is more mature, less rambunctious, less rebellious, and not as much of a tomboy than we remember. She is dating a man who is confident that she will marry him, but she has her doubts. She idolized her father as a child, but by the end of Go Set a Watchman, she realizes that her father is struggling with arthritis and is a flawed human being. Has living away from Maycomb and in a place like New York had an impact on Scout? What does she think about New York and life there? So I put these questions in with Jean Louise, and she was like mostly mentioned as that in Go Set a Watchman. It was very weird for me to read and listen to that a lot because I know her as Scout from To Kill a Mockingbird. So I'm going to say Scout a lot. And if you haven't read To Kill a Mockingbird, Jean Louise and Scout are the same person. She was known as Scout because of her tomboyish behavior in books in the first book. But anyway, going back to the second question. I think living in New York has matured Scout. She's a quieter, tamer version of herself than from 20 years ago. It has made her ignorant of the changes down south by living in New York. She cut herself off from her town and her connections to her family. Harper Lee describes this time in Macomb County was a time where they were cut off from the rest of the nation. Even some of its civilians were unaware of the South's political predilections, so it's not a surprise that Scout doesn't know anything about her hometown until arriving back there. The South had voted Republican, which is different than the Northern vote of Democratic. So she might have been aware of these political changes living in New York and being an adult and more aware of the world, or she could have been ignorant. So I think that's changed her viewpoints of the changes with the political systems of this time period. Describe the relationship between Scout and Atticus at the beginning of the novel. Does Scout idealize her father too much? How does she react when she discovers that her father is a flawed human being? By the novel's end, how do father and daughter accommodate each other? And I don't think that Scout idolized her father too much. I think she shows the perfect amount of love and appreciation for him. But when she sees that he is struggling with his health, she wonders if she should move back to Macomb permanently to help care for him. She also sees how he is flawed as a person, but that reaction was more subdued and disappointed, in my opinion, compared to her love for him when she realized that he was ill. And by the end of the book, Scout and her father argue about their different beliefs. Scout eventually forgives him, even though her father doesn't try to compromise or understand her. But they do end up living happily ever after. Her heart is in the right place when it comes to trying to take care of him, even though they don't end up forgiving each other. So she kind of forgives him, but he doesn't forgive her, despite their differences, beliefs, and the political strifes and what's surrounding them and how it's impacted them. So her father didn't really forgive her for how she has adapted and matured. But I think that's how this world works. We might not have the same beliefs as the next person, but we have to learn to understand, or at least attempt to understand each other in order for us to get along. And that is all for my questions. They're very short. And the first one was kind of like a background question on who is Scout and how she changed from the first book. And then I think if you want to do this as for your own book club, or if you're a teacher and you want to do this for your kids, you can definitely talk about how life has changed in Macomb in New York City of this time period, and political differences, and how people don't get along all the time because they have different beliefs, and how that changes a person and like family relationships because of those differences. I think this is a great book for that. I think it's great for school systems to have. It might be a banned book, especially if it's a sequel to Kill a Mockingbird. But I think it'll also be a good book club book. So I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want this book for your book club or school, I do have a website called lexisbooknook.com. That is spelled Lexies, booknook.com. Go in the bookshop tab, and I have this book listed on Amazon. I do make a small commission based on your sale, but no extra cost to you. But you can also see a list of other books I've read so far this year. You can buy your own copy. You can listen to my episode as many times as you want on BookTube. And here are just a couple of discussion questions. If you want to listen to my podcast, it is free on Spotify. All the benefits are there with the addition of seeing my face, this book nook, and the covers on Patreon only for $3 a month if you want to support the podcast. You also get the same benefits here on BookTube. I'll have all those episodes here, plus bonus episodes like today. So I really hope you enjoyed this episode and you take advantage of all these opportunities. And I hope you keep on reading.